I'm telling you, an angel appeared in my bedroom in the middle of the night when I was 6 years old. Now, I've got to give you a little backstory, and maybe first I should welcome you to Paranormal Christian. And we're going to be sharing a lot of great stories here about ghosts, haunted houses, Bigfoot, Mothman, aliens, UFOs, UAPs, lost time, and any other paranormal experience you can think of. And so one of the things that we want to do here is give an opportunity for people to share their stories. We want to hear the extraordinary experiences of ordinary people. We do not claim to make any concrete interpretations about what has happened, but just to give a judgment-free zone for honest, regular people to share their stories. And I've got quite a few myself. So let's tell stories. You know, lately there's a lot of talk in our nation about aliens. And in 2019, Congress started putting a lot of pressure on the Pentagon and the intelligence community to release the UFO files, to release what was known about aliens, about extraterrestrials. All of the claims for all of these years that the government said, hey, that crash, that was really just a weather balloon. That was really just a misidentified object. That was some test aircraft from the military. Things were not adding up. And so Congress put the pressure on, and since 2019, there have been some changes. There have been some things declassified, especially in the last 3 weeks. I'm recording this at the beginning of June 2026. And just a few weeks ago, the Pentagon began to release, actually on a special government website, open to the public, all of the video files, all of the documents, where they say, these were not weather balloons. These are crafts that, as far as we can tell, are not of human origin. And some people are even claiming that the government has had the bodies, perhaps dead alien bodies, in the crashes of these different aircrafts, these sorts of things. Now, my question today, or my thought today, is, are some people seeing things that have never been explained? Probably so. I also think that there are people seeing things that maybe they have misidentified. You know, as a believer in the Bible, I believe that the Bible is God's word, and the Bible is very clear in telling us that there is a whole spiritual world around us, spiritual beings that exist. If we believe in the Bible, we believe in spiritual beings. And God is not the only spiritual being, but the Bible tells us about angels. The Bible tells us about demons. The Bible tells us about the heavenly Sanhedrin and the heavenly council, the whole hosts of heaven. Are the stars simply just stars? These kinds of questions are some of the thoughts as people begin to interpret these things. But I think people are sometimes encountering spiritual beings and they don't know what else to call it. And so they say, this was an extraterrestrial encounter. This was an alien encounter. Bridging to my thought in my opening line, I've got to tell you something that happened to me when I was 6 years old. The house that I grew up in, where I sit today, is only about a quarter of a mile from that house. I might drive there when I leave here. This house had some strange things happening. Throughout my entire childhood, that house supplied us with a lot of great stories. Some that my dad said, you're just imagining things. Later, we would find out that some of these things that maybe other people had experienced, and they could not simply be brushed off. And I want to tell you about one of those today. Growing up in a haunted house, I believed as a child that just as my family lived in the house, my mom, my dad, me, my sister, I believed that the ghost family also lived in my house. I believed that if a house was haunted, that there was a ghost family that lived there. And I understand now that that's not how that works, or even what the interpretation of a ghost is. We may have some differences on that, which we'll talk about in later episodes. But as a 6-year-old child, I would always fall asleep at night watching my television. And I had a set of bunk beds in my bedroom. I slept on the lower bunk. That was my bed. The top bunk was reserved for friends or cousins whenever they would come over and spend the night. And so I had a sleep timer on my television. After I fell asleep, the sleep timer would go off some point after that, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it was. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night. I don't know how long it had been since the sleep timer went off. All I knew is that it was dark, and I didn't like being in there in the dark. I became very afraid. I was so scared laying there in the dark. I decided that I wanted to yell for my mom. I wanted my mom to come in the room. And just before I yelled out, a thought ran through my head. What if I yell for my mom and the ghost mom comes in the room? What if the ghost mom hears me and she responds? And I certainly didn't want the ghost mom coming in my room. So I did not yell for my mom, and I laid there in silence. And after just a few moments, laying there on my back, looking up at the bottom of the top bunk, suddenly my room filled with light. Amazing, bright light. I could tell that the light was coming from the foot of the bed. And so slowly I lifted my head, I tilted my head up, and I looked at the foot of my bed, and much to my amazement and also with great fear, there was an angel standing at the foot of my bed. I was really caught off guard. I was really scared. Here is this thing in my room. And when I say an angel, it looked exactly as a child would think that an angel should look. Now, I understand that when the Bible uses the term angel literally means messenger, and it could be used even for human messengers. I also know that there are a lot of angelic beings that would be quite frightening and not the classic robed, winged figure. But for the sake of our story, I'm going to call this which I saw an angel. And it did look exactly as a child thought an angel would look. This thing was in a white robe, a flowing white robe. It had a very masculine face. It had dirty blonde, golden hair, lots of hair, and massive wings. Massive wings. At that point in my life, I had never looked at a bird's wing up close. If I were to draw a picture of a bird, I would just draw a few big feathers to mark to make the wing. What I didn't know when looking at this angel, suddenly I saw this covering of white, fluffy feathers, and I didn't know that wings were like that on a bird or any winged animal, covered in a covering of soft feathers. But I noticed it on this angel. It was a covering. The next thing I noticed is that the angel was standing on 3 stairs. There were 3 steps that stopped at the bottom of my bedroom, my bedroom floor. Around the top of the 3 stairs were clouds, and the light was coming down from underneath those clouds. It was up inside. Whatever was up inside those clouds, the light was coming. The angel was descending on the stairs. He continued to walk down the stairs. No matter how many steps he took, though, he was always on the middle step. It was the strangest illusion to me at the time, because when he would take a step, he didn't suddenly jump back up to land on the second step. It was not like an escalator. It was not like the steps were moving. He kept walking down, but somehow smooth, fluid. He was on the same step. My eyes couldn't compute what I was seeing. To me, that was impossible. And that's actually when the fear left. When I saw that, I said, nobody could do this but God. This is a good angel. This is an angel from God. And I laid there looking at this angel. I was no longer afraid. I had the strange sense that this was not the first time I had been in the presence of this angel, nor would it be the last. It's just like he was there, simply there. After some time, I closed my eyes and I went back to sleep. And honestly, the next day, I don't remember giving this much thought. I didn't talk to anybody about it. A few weeks later, we were at my grandma and grandpa's house. We had been there for dinner. My mom and dad, my grandparents, they were in the kitchen, which was open to the living room. They were finishing up supper. and I was in the living room floor playing with, I don't know, some toys or something. And I heard my grandfather say to my mom and dad, he had gotten up and walked across the kitchen to a shelf, and he picked up a book. And he said, "Hey," he said, "I've been reading this." He said, "This is Billy Graham's new book called Angels." Well, that perked my ears. He said, in the book, Billy Graham says that everyone has a guardian angel. I sat up, I turned, I said, "I've seen mine." And they said, "What's that?" I said, "I've seen my guardian angel." They said, "Well, what do you mean?" And I shared with them the exact story that I've just shared with you. A few weeks later, maybe it would have been just even a week later, we were sitting in church on a Sunday morning. I was sitting with my grandfather, and he handed me an index card and an ink pen. I used to always love to draw while I was sitting in church. And so I would sit and draw as I would hear whatever the preacher was talking about. And I would just draw picture after picture. My grandfather, he said, "Hey, would you draw a picture of the angel that you saw?" And so I drew that for him. And he tucked it back into his Bible. Years later, now I was born in 1981. I was about 6 years old at the time. So that happened about 1987. Years later, I had told my grandfather that one day, in the sweet by and by, I wanted his Bible. I wanted to own his Bible one day whenever he was gone. It was a black King James Version, Schofield study Bible. When my grandfather passed in 2013, he died on the Thursday before Easter Sunday, and I received that Bible. I actually preached my grandfather's funeral, and I preached it from that Bible. Now, I had the Bible for quite some time, and I was flipping through the pages, and Grandpa was a note taker. He had lots of notes. He had lots of bulletins, pamphlets, gospel tracts, all kinds of literature. Everything went into that Bible. And so you could get quite a history on my grandfather from going through his Bible. And one day I was going through that Bible again, and the pages stopped on a little weathered index card. And I pulled it out, and it was the picture of the angel. Sitting here telling the story, now I realize that I should have brought it. Why didn't I bring it? I'll do it on another episode. But I have now his Bible, and I have that picture of that angel that I drew. The picture of the angel that I saw in my bedroom when I was only 6 years old. You know, I believe very much in the spiritual realm. That story, sometimes when I tell it, I'm wondering, am I actually still remembering it? Or am I just remembering telling the story so many times now as I have through the years? It's been a great encouragement to me. I've always sensed that I'm not by myself. And I know that God himself is with me, and that God is definitely enough, even all by himself. But through Scripture, he chose to use angels and spiritual beings, and he chose to use them as vessels of messages and vessels of protection, and on and on and on. I am curious with all of the alien phenomenon going on, and I'm open to hear people of every sort of thought. I am very open to the thought that some people are experiencing things that may not be an angel, may not be a demon. It may be something still that we haven't identified, something we haven't figured out, or something that is beyond the knowledge that we're going to have anytime soon. But I have wondered if some people perhaps have encountered an angel, maybe like I encountered an angel, or perhaps they've encountered an evil presence, and not knowing what to call it, said, "I have had an extraterrestrial experience. I've had an alien encounter." Maybe you've had a story that you would like to share, an encounter you would like to share. I would love to hear it from you. One of the things that I want to do here on Paranormal Christian is not just to bring you the stories from my own family, but I want to hear from you. I'm curious about your interpretation. There will be people listening to this that don't believe anything that I've said, and that is perfectly okay with me. There are people that will believe that I did see something, but that I misidentified it. And that is also okay with me. I would love to hear your thoughts. And then there will be others that say, I think this guy's telling the truth, and I think that he's right about what he saw. But I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear your stories. And if you've got a great story, that's the heartbeat of Paranormal Christian. There's a great chance that your story will end up here on Paranormal Christian if you'll give me permission to share it. And so this is what I'd like you to do right now. Would you subscribe to us, probably on the social media platform where you're watching? If you're watching on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, on Facebook, would you subscribe and follow so that you get notifications when I've released a new video? And would you also share us with all your friends? Would you give us a share? Would you tag in the comments? Would you talk about it? Would you let people know? And also, would you head over to paranormalchristian.com and you can grab some Paranormal Christian merch. You can grab a hoodie like the one that I've got. There are some great trucker caps. There are some coffee mugs and some stickers and all kinds of stuff. And you can help us to share the word about these great stories. And so send us all of your encounters, all of your experiences, and let's tell stories. So until next time, we appreciate you watching. Send those stories and keep it PC.